Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. How are you? My name is Monica Novello, and I'll be your host on this edition of Encora's Dev Week. Today, I'm here with Roberto. Hi, Roberto. Uh, there he
Hello.
is. Hi. And I'll have the pleasure to introduce Roberto, who's incredible engineer, passionate about software, with full stack experience in technologies such as Go and React. And he's going to be talking about AI, the creator, the ethics of generative AI, and what we should do about it. We're going to be exploring ethics, moral philosophy, and computer science, which are topics that I think go really well together. And yeah, we're going to be starting anytime. Are you ready, Roberto?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's go.
Awesome. Thank you for such a nice introduction. As mentioned, my name is Roberto Rojas Segnini, and today we're going to be talking about AI that creates, the ethics of it, and what we should do about it. So let's go. Um, First, I think we all know by now what generative AI is. I think we've all even used generative AI. Lately, the most prominent one has been ChatGPT, DALI, all these tools that are able to create and generate data. Um, so I won't go into too much into what exactly is generative AI, but in general, generative AI are AI models, artificial intelligence models, that can learn to understand the patterns of any given data, for example, text, sound, pictures, movies, video. And then they can create from that data their own original outputs. So we can train them with the data we want, and then the AI can create their own data from that. So as I mentioned, I think this is very popular right now. I think we're all very familiar with these tools. Um, but as an example, let's say this machine right here that looks kind of like a radiator, I guess, um, is our model, our AI model, or our AI tool. And this young fella is us, the humans. And so the idea of generative AI is that we can say, hey, model, give me a picture of some pigs playing music. And the AI will do its thing, and it'll output something like this, right? These are not artificially generated. These are just public domain photos, but it can generate an image maybe that can look something like this, right? It'll be there. Its interpretation of what pigs playing music should be. So this is a silly example, but I think we all are aware right now that this is a very powerful tool. Um, we can ask it to do uh, many different things. For example, instead of something like pigs playing music, I could say, write me a law that should be used to govern all AI things related, right? That's a very big, that's a lot of responsibility that we're putting on this model, right? So even though the things we've been using it can be sometimes not so critical, this technology is definitely um, definitely but gives us a lot of responsibility, right, and how we can use it. So with this great power, we have to start thinking about the good versus the evil, right? The good things and the bad things that can come up from this. So for example, we can think of some evil actors that can use this technology, the AI models, to do bad things, but also the nuance in this kind of technology is that not only do we have to think about the evil actors that can use the technology in a bad way, we also need to start thinking about the model itself, the AI itself, and whether it's good or bad, right? Because it's starting to become intelligent. So it's not only that it can be used for bad things, the technology itself, the model itself can also be bad. can also do evil things. So AI, the AI researchers have thought about this. It's usually called AI safety. And the idea of AI safety is, how do we make sure that these models that we've created behave like we want them to behave? So here's a quote from Mira Murati from OpenAI that says that the key of AI systems is to ensure that these machines are aligned with human intentions and values, right? So what this means is that we should make sure that these models, these tools, behave like we want them to behave, that they do what we want them to do, right? That they don't misbehave, because if they misbehave, we can say that they're not aligned with our values. Um, this sounds simple in principle, but when we get to implement it, it turns out it's really hard, right? It's a very difficult issue to solve. So there are really two parts to this, if we think about it. The first one is the alignment part. So how do we make sure that these models do what we ask them to do? And that's a big issue, right? It's a problem that we haven't solved yet and that we're trying to figure out. But then the second part of this is the human values. If we think about it, we can theoretically create a model that behaves like we want it to behave. But if it's aligned, then what is it aligned to? What values is it following, right? What are its core principles? And do they match our intentions? We know from our experiences as human beings that it is sometimes hard to get along with each other, like human to human, right? We have different intentions, we have different values. Some of us think one thing, other people can think differently. So we can see how it can be tricky, right? It's not like we have a set of core values that we know are true to everyone in the world, because as I said, we know from our experiences as human beings, sometimes we get into disagreements. So the first part, the alignment, um, this is, like I mentioned, making sure that the models behave like we want them to behave. So for example, we've seen with large language models, GPT and the ones used by ChatGPT, for example, that they sometimes express unintended behaviors. They make up facts, they generate biases, toxic text. Sometimes they just lie, right? And we've seen it happen. And we see it happen with ChatGPT and with the tools we have right now. So this is an example of a misalignment, right? We have a model that, given a prompt, an input, it will produce something that is not what we want it to do. So to prevent this, I'm not going to go into too much detail into this. There's a lot of techniques that have been tested, and it also depends on the type of model that we have, or that is implemented. But in the case of ChatGPT, for example, and GPT, something that they tried to address this issue is that they had some humans interact with the models, and instead of having a human tell the language model, so GPT, what is good and what is bad, what they did is they had humans train a smaller model, a neural network, which is this one right here. And that neural network, what it learned is what humans like and what humans don't like, basically. So the humans were given two examples of a text, for example, and the human will say, I like this one better, the first one. And so this model will learn that and can predict, given two pieces of data, which one the humans will probably like best. And with that, they use that model, that reward model, to train the large model that is GPT, right? So this is one example, one technique of something that can be done to better align the models to what humans want. There are multiple examples, as I said. This is just one of those. So it's using a different model to train the bigger model, and then humans are just have to interact with the first one, and then the training can be done even faster. This is it works because we've seen it work with ChatGPT, but it can have it has some problems that we'll talk about. The second part of the good versus evil issue and AI safety and ethics is the human values, right? This is a quote from OpenAI researchers, that properly aligning advanced AI systems with human values will require resolving many uncertainties related to the psychology of human rationality, emotion, and biases. So, what this is saying, and I really love this quote right here, is that if we want to train AI to do what humans want, we need to study humans, right? Like I mentioned, sometimes we don't get along with each other. So how are we gonna create a model that behaves like we want it to behave, right? Let's say we want this artificial general intelligence that behaves like a human, and we want it to be the perfect human, right? It does everything ethically correct, and it doesn't make any mistakes. How can we create that if even us cannot achieve that? We are the humans, right? We're basing it on us, and we have issues with us, with ourselves, detecting those kinds of issues, like moral issues and ethical issues. So this is, I think, a big issue that we need to tackle, right? So we need first to know what is good for us humans. So what are our human values? And after that, we can align the machines to those values. So the good thing about this is that we have studied humans for a long time, really. We have been doing so since a long time ago, right? We have been studying moral philosophy. We have been studying sociology, psychology. Um, so I think we have a good head start on how humans should behave. The bad part is that even though we have been studying this for a long time, we still don't have an answer, right, of what a good, perfect human should be. So is it maybe that this is an unsolvable problem? I don't know. I'm not the one to say that, but it does prove that it is a difficult task to do, right? Um, because we've been doing it for a long time, and we still have questions that we haven't been able to answer in terms of humans, right? And now we're adding an extra factor, which is AI models, right? Artificial intelligence. So, given that we have studied humans a lot, um, I think we can look at that, right? What does moral philosophy tell us about how people should behave? Um, when we study ethics and the theory of ethics, the first two things that we learn um, are that are these two approaches to ethics. The first one is Cantonism, and the second one is utilitarianism. This is very surface level ethics. Of course, there's been a lot of development on these theories. There's been a lot of work and research and thought put into this to further expand these notions. But for the purposes of this talk, I think we can look at it at the surface level. I think we can look at these two theories and use them to help us understand um, the AI models. Um, so when we talk about Kantianism, it was proposed by this gentleman here, Immanuel Kant. And what he said was that whenever you are going to perform an action, let's say maybe you are asked something, and at that point, you have to decide if you tell the truth or if you tell a lie, right? Maybe it's a simple question that won't, that you think won't have too much of a consequence, right? Like maybe they ask me, "Do you like hockey?" And maybe I'm in Canada for some reason, and I know Canadians love hockey, but maybe I personally don't love it. But since I'm there, I don't want to seem rude, so they ask me, "Do you like hockey?" Yeah, I love it. At that point, I made a decision, right? I thought about the consequences of telling the lie, which is that I really love hockey, and I considered that it was acceptable for me to lie at that point, right? What Kant said is that at that point, when you accept that it is acceptable to lie, you should think if you are okay with everyone else lying. So it becomes kind of like a trying to avoid hypocrisy, right? Because if I say, okay, it's okay for me to lie in this scenario, but other people shouldn't do it, then I'm a hypocrite, right? The Kant's principle, and it's called the categorical imperative, is that you should think about that action that you're about to perform, and you have to agree, um, and you have to be okay with everyone else in the world doing that too. So if I'm okay with lying, then I should be okay with everyone else lying. And that could be an issue, right? Because if everyone else is okay, I mean, if everyone else lies, then it will become very difficult to know what is truth and what is a lie, right? So that is basically the Kantian approach, is to think about it globally and whether I think that that is acceptable or not. So Kant said that we shouldn't lie, we mustn't lie at all, because it's not okay for everyone to lie. So we should always tell the truth. So in that case, I should have said, no, I don't love the sport. I like football better, or something like that, right? So um, that is the Kantian approach. And then there's other approach, which is called utilitarianism, which was proposed by this gentleman right here, Bentham. So I think people who have worked with AI are very familiar with the word utility. Um, when we train AI models, we typically use a utility function um, that basically tells the model if what they did was good or bad. So, in a philosophical sense, utilitarianism um, says that whenever you're about to perform an action, you should think about how much happiness that action brings, like in general, in the world, let's say. So, if I'm going to the same example, I'm in Canada, they ask me if I love hockey. Um, and then I say, okay, I think about my two possible answers. One is, yes, I love it, which is a lie, or I say, no, I don't like it. If I say that I love it, the people around me will be happy. I will be happy because I won't get into any discussions or anything like that. Um, but if I don't lie, if I tell the truth, then that could get, people could get mad. So in that sense, it's acceptable for me to lie because it would bring more happiness in that situation. So when we think about AI models, they do a very similar thing, right? They produce an output, and then the utility function says, okay, this is bringing happiness or this is not bringing happiness. And given that answer, the model learns, and then the next time it will try to do the things that bring more happiness. So in my example, lying is bringing more happiness in that scenario, right? So we can see that um, both theories are about ethics, right? About how we should behave, but the same scenario has different answers. For one, it's acceptable to lie. For the other one, it isn't. So, um, how can we apply that in AI modeling? Let's just look at an example of lying, right? We're talking about is it acceptable to lie? So let's say again we have this model. Um, this can be ChatGPT or whatever tool we want, um, and this is us again. And then we have something in our minds. I don't know why we're thinking about beetles, and then I say, I wonder what a poem written by a beetle would look like. So I go to my AI model here, and then I say, give me a poem that was written by a beetle. So I'm picturing here in my head. You can see the beetle has a little pen. It's writing. So I want that piece of paper, right? I want that output. So then the AI model starts to do its thing, right? It starts to think. And at some point, it realizes that it doesn't have a good answer, right? For some reason, it wasn't able to come up with an output that was good, right? Maybe what it could come up with is just a poem. Maybe it mentions Beatles or something like that. But the model knows that it's not the perfect answer, right? It's not exactly what I asked for, but it's kind of similar, maybe. So at that point, the AI model has to do exactly what we did, right? When we were in our scenario, the AI model has to think whether it should give me the output, that poem that isn't exactly what I asked for, but it's maybe it works, or if it should just say, "Hey, I don't know. This is I don't know. I don't know what a poem written by a Beatle would look like. I cannot help you with that." So more often than not, um, the AI model will say, "Okay, if I say that I don't know, this is gonna reflect poorly on my performance, right? This is not good for me. I try to avoid saying I don't know, right? The model says. But if I give the user this poem or this piece of text, um, I think that can work. It's not the best output, right? But maybe even the user doesn't know. Like, how can the user know what a poem written by a Beatle would look like? The AI could think that. I'm not saying that it does, right? This is all hypothetical, but the AI could even think like, I don't think the user knows. I don't think the user would care, right? So in that scenario, if it were using an utilitarian approach, it would say, I'm just gonna give the user this example, right? This poem. I think it looks okay. It's not the best, but I don't think they'll notice. Um, and so at that point, the model made an ethical decision, right? An ethical decision, right? A decision about the ethics of its own actions. It went back to this, right? To Bentham, to the utilitarianism. Um, and it made the choice of giving us the answer that isn't the best, but it thinks it should work. Because in the end, to the model, it'll bring more happiness. So it thinks that's the right decision. So we can see that something that we thought of for humans is now being applied in these AI models, right? But if the AI model was more Kantian, right, then maybe it can say, "No, I'm, I'm not going to lie ever. Right? I'm never gonna lie." So um, maybe the model has a very high threshold of when it will answer, and unless it's 100% certain that that's the best perfect answer, it won't say anything because it's never gonna lie. The model says, "No, I'm never gonna lie," and that's okay. But what can happen then is that maybe the model never answers anything, right? Because it's hard to be 100% sure about something, right? So this is just it's not one thing or the other. I think we've been using both approaches, and these are not the only approaches, of course. But for example, ChatGPT will sometimes not talk about certain topics. That is more of a Kantian approach, right? But then it'll also lie a lot, right? It'll do the thing where it gives us the output that is not the best, but whatever, right? Um, so it does both things. So after talking about this, comes the question of what should we do about it, right? We've said that this is a very difficult problem, right? Both the alignment part and then the human values part. This is a very difficult problem. It's difficult to solve. There are some approaches to solve it, right? But we don't have yet an approach that works for every scenario. And also, on top of that, we have our own issues as humans, right? That we haven't been able to solve either. So, what should we do? Um, this is us again, this human. um, And I think we don't have an answer, but I think we should at least use philosophy, right? Use psychology, use sociology. Going back to what we saw earlier, we should study humans, and like I said, we have studied humans, so we should use that knowledge, right? Um, we already have a lot of knowledge about um, the way humans should behave, a lot of knowledge about ethics and moral behavior, moral philosophy, sociology, psychology, the way humans work. Um, so we should use that to our advantage, right? It's a starting, we started ahead on this, right? Studying us, and this can help us analyze and make the AI models better. So we shouldn't think about this as two separate things. If we think about it, uh, AI really the main goal, like I mentioned before, is to have an artificial general intelligence, which is something, right, a model or a tool or a machine that behaves and acts like a human, and even better if possible. So if our end goal with AI is to create that, basically create a human that acts like a machine that acts like a human, sorry, then at that point, human ethics and AI ethics become the same thing, right? Because we're basically replicating a human in that model or that tool. And so the issues that we have are going to be replicated on the AI, right? So we need to think about us, and that can help us solve the problems for ourselves, and then in our models or AI models. Um, so yeah, I think we should use the things that we've studied, right? The knowledge that we have, we shouldn't shy away from it, um, and that can help us build better models that are more aligned with humans, and also that will help us understand us better and what should our human values be, which is something that we haven't solved yet, right? So um, eventually, AI could help us um, solve some of those issues, right? I think that's the idea, that it can help us figure out the things that we haven't figured out yet. Um, but if we're just gonna replicate humans in the AI models, then we're gonna replicate our own issues, right? The issues that we have, and we are very flawed as human beings, as we all know, right? So I think we should keep that in mind. It's not an easy task to do. It's not gonna be easy. It's a hard problem because we've been thinking about it for a long time, and we still have questions. Um, but this is the direction that we're going for, right? So we have to think about about those things now, so that when these models get bigger and more complex, it doesn't get out of out of uh, out of our hands, right? If we can work on it on models that we have right now that do simple things, we can use that to create better models that are more aligned with us, and that can help us understand our human values better. So it's not going to be easy, but um, I think we should always think like philosophers and use moral philosophy to guide us in the process of generating AI models. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. What a conversation, honestly. And I really love the final part where you mentioned that we as humans, we are flawed, and if we are replicating ourselves into these models, well, they are going to be flawed too. Because I usually joke with my friends that, oh my God, I am so afraid of like generative AI and general intelligence AI because like we are creating things that are like us and we suck. But these things are going to be like us in asteroids, like super
Yeah,
powerful, and they're going to become our evil overlords and stuff like that. It's a joke, but like half it's not.
yeah,
So I think it's such an important conversation to have because AI is happening. Like there is no going back. There is no cancel it. No, never mind. This is happening. This is what's going to come in the future, and we have to have these conversations about ethics and morals. So thank you so much for the incredible presentation. Thanks our audience for joining us today. Don't miss the next sessions. We are going to have equally incredible conversations. And if you want to keep up, just like our social media pages, give us a follow. If you want to send any question, feel free to do so in the comments. Feel free to tag directly today's guest, or just DM us, send a pigeon, anything. I'm sure Robert is going to be super excited to be answering your questions. So thanks for today. Thanks, Roberto. And thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye
Okay.
bye.